Okay, hi everyone. Today I'll be going through a firms and decisions essay question. This was actually this is quite an interesting question because I think a lot of us we may not be very clear on what the difference between competition and contestability is. Okay, so I'll look straight into the question. So here for 5A, this is question for this is just treat it as A and B, okay? For question A, right, they're asking us to explain how increased competition and greater contestability may lead to lower prices. So this is our end goal, right? We need to explain lower prices. For part B, you want to discuss the ability of these firms to survive when there's an increase in competition and contestability due to the full liberalization of Singapore's electricity retail market. So let's look at the preamble a bit, okay? The Energy Market Authority in Singapore fully liberalized the electricity retail market. Although the power grid is still operated by SP, the SP group, consumers can now choose other more attractive alternative price plan offered by other approved electricity retailers. However, they remain the sole supplier of gas and water services. Okay, so I'll go through part A first. So when we look at part A, right, I will focus more on the diagram drawing for this question and the explanation rather than the in-depth analysis. So my key argument 1, right, I'll explain how an increase in competition will lead to a fall in prices. Okay, so here I will just quickly draw the diagram for the firm for SP group, right? So price, revenue, cost. So maybe initially the demand is very, very large. So here, and then you realize, right, that at this initial price point or at this initial demand curve, MC curve, you realize that the equilibrium is at P0 Q0, where they are making supernormal profits of area PABAC0. Okay, and then with an increase in competition, right, this could actually lead to a fall in demand, correct? Fall in demand becomes more price elastic. So I'll just do maybe I'll just arbitrarily draw a fall in demand. AR prime equals D prime, and this is MR prime. So you see that the quantity they produce decreases and the price. So here I'm not as concerned about the profits they are making here per se, because I'm more focused on the change in price, right? But for full analysis, I would just say that initially, okay, let me just label this, would be C and D. So initially they'll be producing at MC equals to MR at P0 and Q0, right? And here they make a supernormal profit of area P0 ABAC0. Okay? And when there's so the important part is here, when there's an increase in competition, what happens is that assuming they produce similar goods, right, there'll be a fall in demand from D to D prime, and demand will become more price elastic. And then I show it on the graph, and because of that they will form the new profit maximizing output, where MC equals to MR prime, and then after that you say that the change in the profit, right? Here I drew that it's a subnormal profit, so I'll just explain the new equilibrium output and new profit. But the key thing is, you realize if I just focus on the change in profit, I don't really answer the question. So I would say that due to the increased competition, prices will fall from P0 to P1. You see this fall over here? This is the key idea behind the question. So that's what we need to focus on, right? It's not the profits that they are making, but rather lower prices. For the second part, the key argument 2, right? I'll talk about increase in contestability leading to a fall in price. Okay, so here, right, when I talk about contestability, I need to realize that contestability is determined by barriers to entry and barriers to exit. Simply speaking, my barriers to entry could be things like my setup cost, right? And for barriers to exit, it could be my sunk cost that they cannot get back, non-transferable costs that they cannot get back if they sink it in already. So maybe you give a few examples of this. And then for the diagram of this, right, how does increase in contestability lead to a fall in prices? So if I draw another firm's diagram, you see that PRC 0. What happens when there's an increase in contestability? When I have an increase in contestability, right? So initially, I'll just draw a graph that is almost identical to the one we had just now. MR AR equals to D. This is Q naught. So initially, let's say they are making supernormal profits, AC, of the same area, right? P naught AB AC naught. To deal with the increase in contestability, right? Oh no, I drew it wrongly. But to deal with the increase in contestability, they could actually engage in maybe limit pricing so that they can retain their market share, they can prevent entrants from coming in, whatnot, right? So let's see, if I do it here, let's say I price initially, you see that QA, and then let's say I choose to do AC pricing to decrease prices, right? So if I price at AC, P equals to AC, this will be my new quantity. So this Q naught, Q1, and then this new quantity, this is my new price, P1, right? There's a decrease in price from P naught to P1, and you realize that with this decrease in price, there's an increase in QB. So what is this QA and QB, you might be wondering, right? Basically, you see, this is where P equals to AC at the different price points. Why P equals to AC? So when P equals to AC, right, a firm is making only normal profits, am I right? So at this point, at the different price points P0 and P1, right, QA and QB are the minimum quantity that a firm has to be selling to be able to make normal profits to compete with SP Group. Okay, so if they want to make normal profits, and survive, right, they would actually have to minimally produce at this output level. Okay, so I'll just talk about initially firm or SP Group. Okay, here's not specific to SP Group, so I'll just say firm prices at MC equals to MR at P0, earning P0 Q0, earning a supernormal profit of P0 A B A C naught, right? So initially firm does what? And then at this price point at P0, a possible entrant has to produce minimally output of QA to make normal profits to fight with the firm, right? So if let's say the firm faces an increase in contestability, maybe barriers to entry drop, right? How can firms deal with that? So an increase in contestability, right? So due to increase in contestability, the incumbent firms are now a bit more scared of their position, right? So what they will do is they will decrease their prices, and they'll incumbent firm will price at P equals to AC, right? And at this point they produce Q1 and they price at P1. Okay, so you can see, right, at this new price P1, at P1, a possible entrant now has to produce minimally at output QB to make normal profits so that they can survive competition against the incumbent firm should they choose to compete. A possible entrant has to produce output of QB. And you see that QA and QB is significantly higher than QA, right? And then, so my explanation here would be so why I would say that this increased contestability will lead to a decrease in price, right? Because when there's an increase in contestability, incumbent firms will aim to decrease contestability to deter firms from entering. So maybe they'll engage in limit pricing to increase the barriers to entry, which is one of the factors affecting contestability, right? So because the potential entrants, right, now have to have a higher initial scale of operation, then you can see from QB is greater than QA, right? So very briefly, I'll say that higher initial scale of operation, which means they need more financing, more money, and there's greater risk involved. They will be less likely to enter the firm, so it will decrease contestability again, right? But in the process of doing so, this initial cause of increase in contestability, right, will lead to incumbent firms engaging in maybe limit pricing and as a result of this limit pricing, you see, even though the incumbent firms try to decrease contestability, right, you see that prices will fall from P0 to P1. So that is how contestability will lead to a fall in prices, because incumbent firms will try to do something about it. So the difference between competition and contestability is the threat of competition. The competition hasn't entered the market yet. Okay, so that's part A. For part B, right, when we want to discuss the ability of the SP group to survive the increase in competition and contestability due to the full liberalization of the market, I wouldn't split it up into thesis and antithesis, but to be clearer, right, my KA1 and KA2 will be talking about how increase in competition affects survivability and how increase in contestability affects survivability. So my KA1 will be on competition to survivability, right? So we need to acknowledge first that an increase in competition leads to a fall in demand and then increase in the PED value. Demand becomes more price elastic, right? So your curves will shift. And then here, in the short run, so now that there's a fall in demand, you realize that there's actually a new profit maximizing output. So in the short run, if prices decrease such that the new price is less than the average variable cost incurred by the firm will shut down. Right? If prices decrease but the price is still greater or equals to AVC, firm will not shut down. And then I explained that in the long run, if prices fall such that P is now less than AVC, or AC rather, since all costs are variable, AC, right? They make subnormal profits, firms will exit the market. So you see, when I talk about survivability here, right, here I try to focus on the short run shutdown condition and the long run shutdown condition, which is simply just exiting the market, right? And then, so here I'll just explain how increasing competition can affect survivability. And then for my key argument 2, KA2, I'll talk about how an increase in contestability can lead to how it affects survivability, right? So I'll just draw the same diagram I drew just now. PRC QT0. And then you see here MC. When I look at this, right, the most important thing I want to look at is how it affects survivability, right? So here, when there is increase in contestability, we argued just now that increase in contestability will lead to the firm maybe engaging in limit pricing, And then, but you realize that when they liberalize the market, when they open it up to more players, right, the barriers to entry actually decreases significantly. So even though at this new point, right, now they have to produce minimally this P1, minimally QB units of goods to remain in the market, right? Because the government has actively engaged in lowering the barriers to entry, right? So barriers to entry decrease. Even though now the initial output required for the firm to produce to compete with incumbent firms increase, right? Firms may still choose to enter. Still choose to enter. And since when the firms engage in limit pricing already, right, you realize that they are already making normal profits. If these firms continue to choose to enter, right, what will happen is that there will be a fall in demand for incumbent firms. And if they are not able to react to this change in the demand for their products, for their goods and services, right, what will happen is that they'll end up making subnormal profits. And if this persists in the long run, it will lead to them exiting the market. It will lead to them shutting down in the long run forever. Okay, so that's generally how I structure my arguments to be. And then you realize for my evaluation, right, my evaluation or my synthesis, my evaluative conclusion, how I would evaluate this, right, I would look at different angles that I can evaluate from. You see here they tell us that there are 12 other approved electricity retailers. I think it's 13 actually. I don't know if they read wrongly, but 12. So we have to acknowledge that the demand for SP is likely to decrease significantly, right? But since the initial sunk cost of laying all the electricity pipes and everything, right, is actually much higher than the variable cost of keeping it operating on a day-to-day basis, right? You can see that it is likely to be guaranteed survival in the short run. Right? Even with, and then I bring the idea of contestability. So this is for competition. Even with increased contestability, right, you realize that when they charge this price, in the short run, if their demand falls due to firms still deciding to enter, right, you can see that they will make some profits, but they may not be too upset about it, they may not be too affected by it, because they can rely on past supernormal profits to tide them over this period, right? So that is how I deal with the increase in contestability and competition in the short run. However, when we look at the long run, right, will this increase in competition really, or contestability, drive SP out of the market? I highly doubt so. For the simple reason, right, SP was the only person providing electricity for a period of time, right? So they have past supernormal profits to rely on. And with these supernormal profits, right, they can engage in some form of R&D to increase profitability. Right? How can they do it? Maybe through process innovation, they can decrease AC, and if they decrease AC, the profitability of their firms will increase. And they have the willingness now, they always had the ability, now they have the willingness, they have the incentive to engage in such research, right? And this will allow them a cost advantage over other firms. And they'll be likely to survive. And if I want to add in another point of evaluation, right, you can see that to begin with, they are still the sole supplier of gas and water services. And because they are sole supplier, right, and gas and water is literally something that most of us, if not all of us, can't live without on a day-to-day basis. Sole supplier of gas and water, so they can actually channel so they're likely probably making supernormal profits there. They can channel the supernormal profits here to engage in R&D to increase profitability of the electricity side of SP Group. Electricity side of SP Group. So you see that because this one firm does gas, does water, does electricity, they can actually use the crazy amount of profits that they earn from elsewhere to actually help tide over their situation or help cope with a change in the market for one of its three sectors. Okay, so generally this is how we would write our part A and part B for this question. I'll give you some time to take part A, to take a snapshot of part A, and then to take a snapshot of part B. And that's all I have for the lecture on this firms and decisions question. If you have any questions, you can always ask your tutors. If not, I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye bye.